When last we saw the doctor, he had to confront a part of him that he thought was long buried. The one who, upon realizing what Rassilon was going to do, and realizing that there was no other way to stop both the High Council of Gallifrey and the Daleks, stole a weapon known as the Moment, whose operating system became sentient and grew a conscience, and chose to use it to burn both Gallifrey and the inhabitants of Skaro alike. The War Doctor's journey was not easy. It started out way back with the 8th Doctor rescuing a woman from a spaceship that's in the process of crashing. She got everyone else off safely, but she was stuck. And he had planned to rescue her, even inviting her to become a companion. But on realizing who he was and what he was, rejecting him, calling the Time Lords no different from the Daleks. Despite the Doctor's pleas, she opted for death. And so, she died, and the Doctor briefly died. But, as luck would have it, they crash-landed on Karn. So the Sisterhood that the 4th Doctor had saved way back in his era decided to return the favor. They brought him back briefly and gave him the opportunity to choose his next regeneration, and convinced him that in order to finally end the war between the Time Lords and the Daleks, the Doctor had to become a warrior. And so, after tipping his hat to companions we've not yet seen, at least not those who haven't showed up in audiobooks and comics, the 8th Doctor becomes the Doctor no more. And so the story of the War Doctor is finally told. Starting with a typical day after Clara becomes a teacher at Coal Hill. Yep, Ian and Barbara's old school. And it seems Ian is still a bigwig at that place. So after a day of teaching, Clara heads off to be with the Doctor and to travel. But then Unit literally pick up the TARDIS and take it to an archive where a very special painting awaits. It seems Queen Elizabeth I gave the Doctor a message, and proof of her credentials is a painting called No More, or Gallifrey Falls. It's a three-dimensional space that looks like a painting, but really it's a moment in time. The fall of Arcadia, one of the great cities of Gallifrey, in the last days of the Time War, just before the War Doctor used the moment. We meet the War Doctor, having just stolen the moment from the Omega Arsenal, the last weapon that the other Time Lords refused to use. Because to use it would stand in judgment of it. And the War Doctor knows this. And when he tries to figure out how to open it, the moment manifests the visage of Rose Tyler, who also calls herself the Bad Wolf. And they had a little chat, then the moment opens up a corridor into the Doctor's future. Meanwhile, at the archive, the Doctor finds more paintings that aren't really paintings, and that something has escaped from them. Several somethings. What? We don't know. But we do know that the message to the Doctor comes after his 10th self married Queen Elizabeth. Just as the 10th Doctor mentioned after he spent some time running after his royal screw-up on Mars. Meanwhile, back in the Middle Ages, the 10th Doctor is wooing a young Queen Elizabeth, and he proposes to her. After she accepts, he accuses her of being a Zygon. You know, those shapeshifters that the 4th Doctor encountered. But it turns out it really is her. The horse was a Zygon the whole time. And eventually, the Zygon turns in from the Doctor's horse into a copy of the Queen. And he's got to figure out what the Zygons want and why they're trying to copy the Queen, because the world's too primitive for them at this point. Meanwhile, the corridor opens up in front of the Queen, the other Queen, and the 10th Doctor. Not to mention a third corridor opening up at the archive. And so, having remembered what happened, the Doctor decides to throw a fez that he's been playing with through the corridor, following it, ending up confronting his 10th self. And after a bit of antics, he has both queens running in opposite direction from each other. And so, after briefly checking to see if the fez will go back through the corridor, which it doesn't, they reverse the polarity, of course, and bring the War Doctor to them. And after a brief argument, the Queen's guards show up. And quite possibly the Queen herself, although she's acting kind of like a Zygon. Then, realizing a potential fourth dimensional tactic, the 11th Doctor orders that they be locked up in the Tower of London, which just so happens to be Kate Stewart's private office and unit. And so, in the locked room, the 11th Doctor scratches a message into a stone wall and has Kate Stewart and her partner in crime fighting, Osgood, who's a fan of the Doctor, so much so that she wears a oversized scarf and has asthma. That's a plot point. Search for the message in the office. Meanwhile, someone gets a phone call concerning something. That's another plot point. After a bit of back and forth concerning what the doctors did to Gallifrey, the moment points out that, oh, by the way, she's still able to be seen by the War Doctor, but not the other two. She points out that the sonic screwdriver, which can't manipulate wood, but could generate a pulse to shatter the wooden door they're locked behind, given time. Technically, all the screwdrivers are the same software running from alternate frames. So, the three doctors come up with a plan. Have the war doctor scan the door and run an algorithm to eventually allow the 11th Doctor's screwdriver to shatter the door. Of course, that turned out not to be necessary because it wasn't actually locked. Back at the archive, more Zygons show up. Turns out they were the ones hiding in the paintings. And later, they hide among forbidden art pieces that they themselves smashed earlier, and launch an attack. This forces Clara and Kate Stewart to retreat to the Black Archive beneath unit headquarters, a place where not even the TARDIS can reach, and where the staff have their memory regularly wiped for security purposes. It seems Jack's vortex manipulator, bequeathed upon one of the captain's many deaths, is down there. And the message the 11th Doctor scrawls onto the stone wall, it's a code to get the thing working again. And just in time, because Kate Stewart is revealed to be a Zygon. And Clara nearly gets munched. Luckily, she sees the message, punches in the code, and allons-y. She ends up back along with the other doctors. And the Queen, who was able to kill her doppelganger. And she pretends to be the Zygon leader and directs her troops to use a Time Lord device to put themselves in the paintings. Once they're all gone, the Queen reveals that she is in fact the Queen, and then the three doctors hatch a plan to use the Gallifrey Falls painting, which is in the Zygon base, and also in the archive now, thanks to that phone call earlier. They use the Time Lord device to travel using the painting, and they break out in dramatic fashion using a broken Dalek. And so the doctors, Clara, the Zygons, and the unit personnel are all in a stalemate because earlier Kate Stewart activated a nuclear weapon that's underneath the Black Archive, which she intends to use to deny the Zygons any forbidden technology, even at the cost of London itself. Even if she could evacuate, it would take too long to give the order. And the Doctor tries to convince her to abort the countdown using the Brigadier's old time-space telegraph. But she's not going to listen, so that's why the three doctors decided to use the painting to come there in person and to force a peace by wiping everyone's memory. They don't know who's a Zygon and who's not. So the unit personnel and Zygons abort the countdown and start negotiations for coexistence. Yay, the day's saved! But they're still the matter of the moment. The War Doctor realizes that his future selves are still doing good, and it's because of the guilt he feels that they still do good. So he's decided he's going to unleash the moment. It even configures a big red button for him to push. But then it gives him even more. It calls the other two doctors and Clara to witness the event. And the other two doctors are even willing to press the button with him. But a look and a few words from Clara, who at this point represents every companion, convinces the 11th Doctor that there has to be a better way. And he realizes the better way. They still have the Time Lord device for generating stasis paintings, or in this case, stasis cubes. And so, the three doctors contact the War Council and say that they plan to freeze Gallifrey itself in a single moment in a pocket universe like a stasis cube. But the War Council makes a point that the calculations could take centuries. Luckily, the Doctor started a long time ago. And every Doctor from first to last, including a 13th Doctor and his terrifying eyes, show up, and all the Doctors in all their TARDISes band together, and with a cry of Geronimo, Alonzi, and Gallifrey stands, they freeze the planet, it vanishes, and the Daleks end up shooting each other. And whether or not they succeeded, they don't know. Also, fans on the internet made a much better version of this scene that you're going to want to check out. So, whenever you're ready. Anyway, in the aftermath, the War Doctor realizes two things. It's better that they potentially failed doing the right thing rather than the other way around. And while he has to remember burning Gallifrey, for this brief period, he's truly the Doctor once again. And he thanks his future selves, hugs Clara goodbye, and heads off to complete his history, which begins with him realizing his body is worn a bit thin and regenerating into the 9th Doctor to begin his adventures once again. And he also mentions the Bad Wolf Girl when he realized that they could try to freeze Gallifrey and save it, which sends up a red flag to the 10th Doctor. Quite possibly, this encounter with the moment is what caused the 9th to go seek out Rose, because the War Doctor knew her name, knew her face. The circle is completing, apparently. Also, the 11th Doctor, having decided to address the elephant in the room, tells the 10th Doctor about Trenzalore. And the 10th Doctor admits that he does not want to go, which could be a callback to when he said it just after regenerating, or just before regenerating, excuse me, which makes a lot more sense now. But there's one more person the 11th Doctor has to talk to before departing the archive. The Curator, who may or may not be the Doctor's future self, revisiting an old favorite, regeneration. It seems people got it wrong when they named the painting. Turns out it was called Gallifrey Falls No More. Now, whether or not that means Gallifrey was saved, who knows? But the Doctor makes a solemn vow. He's going to find Gallifrey. If it's out there, he will find it. For everyone. And let's hope, for his sake, he finds it quickly. Because not long after, a message starts being broadcast from some planet, but no one can figure out what the message is. It's garbled, but for some reason it instills fear in all the various species throughout the system. And so everyone shows up. Nearly everyone from the Doctor's old rogues gallery, including Daleks and Cybermen. And yet they don't fire a single shot at each other. Because the church where those soldier clerics came from, the papal mainframe, has put up a shield around the planet. And only the Doctor is going to be allowed to investigate, potentially. But first, when he calls on Clara after she asks him to pretend to be her boyfriend for the sake of her family on Christmas, he shows up to the party naked. Yeah, apparently you have to be naked to approach the papal mainframe for some reason, even though the clerics and nuns are not naked. And after a bit of awkwardness with Clara's family, and Clara having to wear holographic clothing for the audience and the Doctor's sake, as he's doing with her, but not her family, oops. They approach the papal mainframe, and the Doctor has to introduce Clara to the Silents, who are lurking about. Turns out they're part of this church. Culverian was originally a papal mainframe member who broke away to try to prevent the Doctor from finding this message, because when he heads down to the planet, A, he finds a truth field, and B, he finds weeping angels trying to attack, and C, he reveals that he shaved his head to hide a key to the TARDIS under a wig. Yeah, they wrote the Doctor being bald into this episode because Matt Smith had to shave his head for a separate role. It works. And so the Doctor cheats the papal mainframe by calling down the TARDIS and using his little robot companion, severed Cyberman head he calls Handles, with all the yucky bits removed, combined with the Time Lord seal that he stole from the Master way back in the era of the Five Doctors, to finally translate the message. Now, funny enough, Handles said the message and the planet were Gallifreyan. But it turns out it was just the message that was Gallifreyan. And it's 2 words. Doctor Who. And everyone realizes that it's the Time Lords. They're trying to find their way back through wherever they are into our reality. And they're doing it in the crack in the universe. Yep, the crack from Amelia Pond's wall is still there. The Time Lords are on the other side, and if they come through, they'll inadvertently restart the Time War. So the Doctor is at a stalemate. The Papal Mainframe and the Doctor have to stay and defend Trenzalore, which, by the way, is the planet's actual name. Whoops. It seems the Doctor's end has finally come. Because he can't leave. He can't let the Papal Mainframe just take care of things. Because they have declared that the silence will fall. They're going to prevent the Doctor from speaking his name and letting the Time Lords back through the rift. And he can't leave because then they'll all just blow up the planet when there are innocent people on the planet. In a town called Christmas, of all things. So, to protect her, the Doctor sends Clara away. Of course, then she tries to force her way back into the TARDIS as it departs, which causes a time delay. 300 years pass. The Doctor has become a Santa Claus-like figure for the people of Christmas, and the various enemies of the Doctor have laid siege to Trenzalore. But the Papal Mainframe are keeping them at bay. Then, when Clara finally returns, very irate, understandably so, the head matron, Tasha, asks for a parley. But it's a trap. The Daleks have taken over the Papal Mainframe, turned everyone into Dalek puppets, including the Silents, who are still able to make you forget that you ever saw them. And they used Tasha's memory of the Doctor to reignite their hatred of him. So much for Doctor Who. But thankfully there's enough of Tasha's mind left to oppose the Daleks. She sends him and Clara back to Trenzalore's surface to continue protecting the Rift and the people. And some of the Silents managed to avoid being turned into puppets. And with Tasha helping to lead them, they work with the Doctor to oppose the Daleks. Meanwhile, Clara gets sent back to her family on Christmas. And after watching her grandma reminisce about her husband and when she first met him, Clara is morose, since that was goodbye. The Doctor even promised that he wouldn't send her away again. Rule 1, the Doctor lies. But eventually, the TARDIS returns. Clara happily grabs a Christmas cracker to celebrate with him, only to find Tasha piloting the TARDIS. It seems many more centuries have passed. The Doctor is reaching his end. The Daleks are the last ones standing, all others having been defeated or retreated. The Silence dwindling, Pip mainframe all but defeated. It seems the Daleks are about to win. And Tasha brings Clara to tell the Doctor goodbye, so he doesn't have to die alone. And they have a nice little moment with the Doctor, who now looks like his first incarnation, enjoying the surprises from the Christmas cracker, a poem which talks about the 11th hour being up and the clock striking 12. And then the Daleks show up, demanding to see the Doctor, to watch him die, finally. So while he goes up to snark at the Daleks, who brought their Parliament ship right into close orbit near the town to watch it burn, Clara goes to the crack in the wall and implores the Time Lords to stay on their side and help him, because his true name is in fact the Doctor. That's who he's always been. He might have faltered a few times, but at his heart he is the Doctor. And I guess they heard her, because the crack quickly moves from the wall to the sky. And while the Doctor is snarking, energy gets pushed through the crack, which the Doctor consumes, and that's revealed to be a whole new cycle of regenerations. But because the Doctor's so old, this new cycle starts with a bang. Clara shelters the surviving Christmas town inhabitants, and the Doctor's regeneration energy blows up all the Daleks. And then the big feels moment happens. The Doctor is restored to his young self as part of the reset. He has fish fingers and custard one last time. He and Clara share a moment. The Doctor gives this great emotional speech about how we're different people from moment to moment, but it's okay moving forward, so long as you remember the people you used to be, and how he'll never forget when he was the Doctor. And then the moment gives him one last vision. Amelia Pond, the first face that this face ever saw. And the two were able to share one final goodbye before the 12th Doctor appears, played by Peter Capaldi. who previously played Caecilius, the stonemason from Pompeii. And after a bit of improv about how he doesn't like the color of his new kidneys, he points out the TARDIS is crashing and not to worry. Then he asks Clara if he knows how to fly the TARDIS. Well, here we go again! And that's the end of the Matt Smith era. When next we meet the Doctor, he has a new face, new adventures, new companions, and old frenemies. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, never forget the people you used to be moving forward in your life. And I will always remember when the Doctor was Matt Smith. Have some fish fingers and custard on me.